Good afternoon and good evening and good morning to those of you who are joining us from across the world today for another edition of Putting the Planet on a Pandemic Diet. We are delighted to have with us Max Rye, co-founder and chief strategist at Turtle-Tree Labs, the company that is developing cruelty-free human and mammalian milk. Having recently raised $6.2 million in a pre-Series A funding round, the company is poised to disrupt the $700 billion dairy industry, which is cell-based milk products. Singapore-based Turtle-Tree Labs is the first company in the world to pioneer cell-based milk, both bovine and human milk. Welcome to Pandemic Pandetry, Max.
Thank you, Lavindra and Karthika. I really appreciate it. I'm really happy to be on here.
Yeah, welcome. So we are really excited to sort of learn a lot more about Turtle-Tree Labs and also a little bit about you as well and how you got to where you to be sort of a co-founder of a company. I understand that you are a AWS certified cloud practitioner. We haven't had one of those yet on the show. So how did AWS cloud guy end up becoming a cell guy in a biotech company?
Well, this is really exciting because for myself, I've been able to reinvent myself more than a few times in my life. And my background, as you mentioned, is in tech. I'm actually a computer engineer by training. And for the last 15 years, I ran a tech company. I was CEO of a tech company that did a lot of digital transformation stuff for a lot of big companies, a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are out there. But for the longest time, for more than a decade, I was complaining and whining about sustainability issues. Nobody's doing enough about it. And really, I got an amazing opportunity a few years ago where I exited my previous company, and I was able to start going around giving talks. And here in Singapore at Google, I was able to. This is where I met my co-founder. I was giving a talk and actually ran into her and really had no idea because I know the folks in California who are doing cell-based meats. So these are some of the technologies that I talk about on stage. And really had no idea that I would be getting into it. It started off with a few conversations, and next thing you know, we had a decent-sized cell biology, molecular biology team around us, and we started looking at how we can tackle the solution of cell-based milk.
So you said that you were actually into sort of you were aware of or conscious of sustainability and issues around that. So that was a long-standing sort of understanding or passion of yours, and that's sort of why you were sort of alert to an opportunity potentially in a completely different field.
Yeah, about 2007 or 8, I think I watched this movie called Climate Refugees, and it was really, really impactful on me. And it was the type of damage that's happened to the planet and what's to come, and just and how this is not 50 years in the future when something's going to happen. It's
Right.
already happening. And so since then, I was really, really concerned about what's happening in the world, and but really wasn't able to do a lot. I was in the middle of running this company, this tech company, and wasn't in the position to do anything about it. And it wasn't almost a decade later where I really got the chance to get out of that whole industry and get into something that allowed me to take my leadership skills and my history of growing companies and put it into something like this, something where I thought could really change the planet, change the world. And you talked about $700 billion industry. And we think about it, that's the biggest segment in food. Actually, it's the biggest. I think chicken is a few hundred billion, beef is about 300-400 billion, I believe. But dairy is the largest, so that also means it's going to have that type of impact on the planet as well. It's quite dramatic.
True, and living in India, I understand the impact of dairy quite closely. We're rather obsessed with that ingredient in our food. But Karthika, go ahead. I know you have tons of questions.
No problem. It's interesting, Max, that you brought up the whole milk component, because what I really wanted to ask you was, what milk you're planning to bring into the market first. Is it human milk or cow's milk, and what your reasons behind those are?
So one of the cool things about our technology is that you can make mammalian milk. We talk about mammalian milk. Well, if you can have a technology that can make cow milk, sheep's, goats, camels, that's all wonderful. But when you have the ability to do this, imagine if you can make any type of milk. And it turned out that once we were able to make human milk, it was like everything opened up. The entire industry was like, oh my gosh, this is the gold standard. We all know that human milk is so precious. There's so many research that's been done by UC Davis, UC San Diego, and tons of other research institutes that show that lactoferrin in human milk, as well as complex sugars, they have some amazing health effects on human beings. But there's just no way to scale it up. There's no way to make it. So when we have this really cool technology where we can make this amazing, precious milk, it was no wonder this is where we saw the biggest demand. So we are a B2B company, and all of our B2B partners said, hey, listen, if you can make human milk, we think the stuff that's in human milk is worth its weight in gold. So I'm a business guy. I can definitely see where I have to look towards where the highest value stuff is. It was natural for us to lead with human milk. Now, we can also make bovine milk and cow milk, but that stuff is, first of all, it's a commodity, right? If we're trying to compete with cow milk that's on the market, especially in India, it's very difficult, first of all. So, but if you have an amazing technology, why not try to go for something that's super precious? And that's what we're doing.
So just to understand a little bit, human milk, obviously, for newborns, it's an incredible sort of thing, right? I mean, it gives you immunity from the mother. It gives you all this incredible nutrition. There is nothing better than human milk for a human baby. So how close to the real thing are you able to sort of create human milk? What are some of the limitations of your product compared to, say, a mother's milk for that particular child?
You know, Lavender, this is what's so interesting. All of these research institutes that I talked about, these guys are not just doing work for babies. The work that they're doing is around adults as well, and around seniors. So it turns out that these complex sugars that are in milk are really amazing for gut health, IBS, even brain health for senior citizens. There's just no way to make a lot of this stuff. But there's a lot of research done on it, especially lactoferrin, which is an antimicrobial, and shown in so many different things, so many different benefits. So that's really what we're going to focus on, not just babies. As a matter of fact, we don't even anticipate the baby infant side as our first products, just because it's going to take a little bit longer for regulatory and so forth. But as early as this year, you may actually see some of our products for the adult and senior specialized nutrition folks that are out there.
If I may ask a follow-up question, Karthika. So I heard two things. I heard B2B. I mean, you're a B2B company, and then you said our products. So are those B2B partners actually making the products? So are you supplying them with lactoferrin, sort of a component of human milk that is like, that has all these superpowers you mentioned, and then they are going to turn that into something else? Is that the business model?
So we have this collaborative effort going on with all of our B2B partners, all these food companies that are out there. And we can produce milk, the entire composition of milk. Okay. And just to answer one of the questions that we've seen from George Brucker, the difference between us, Remilk, and Perfect Day is really that we can make this entire fluid, this entire composition, not just one or two components, which might be whey or casein. Using a technology which is replicating the environment that happens inside of the animal itself. So we're not using fermentation per se, the end product. Okay. We're using cell biology and to be able to produce the end product. That allows us to get the entire thing, which is the milk itself has got 2,000 different things in it, really valuable things in it.
Okay, so if I heard you right, so you can actually make the exact same breast milk. Of course, the immunity and all that you won't get because that's based on the mother, right? So the very close. In composition, scientific composition, chemical composition, it's mother's milk. Yes. In terms of immunity, it doesn't have the natural immunity that is passed from the mother to the baby, right? But other than that, that's 100% milk, right? And if I heard you correctly, you can do the whole thing, or you can give certain parts of that for for someone else to then add it to some kind of food product to make it for example, senior citizens you mentioned. So if you wanted to give that in a some kind of a drinkable drink, you could give those particular ingredients to be incorporated in a drink. Am I understanding that correctly?
You got it right. Absolutely right. So the B2B partners that we have, some of them did a lot of work already on, hey, this is super precious, this component. Can we get this from you guys? And some of them are asking for a much more diverse and deeper, complex array of different things in milk. So we're able to give them whatever they want, and they can actually develop product according to what they believe would go on the shelf and who their customers are.
Karthika?
Yeah, no problems. I was just wondering for the Luddites out there, I mean, for people who don't actually understand, can you explain what lactoferrin is and why that's important to humans?
Absolutely. So if you look at milk, milk's got thousands of things in it, and some of them are the proteins that are in milk. Now, cows and all mammals have very similar components in many ways. Lactoferrin, as well as human alpha lactobumin. These are all names of different proteins. And they're very important, though, for human health, for babies especially, and of course, same thing with cows. There's a big difference, though. Of course, if you can imagine, cow milk is good for cow babies. We consume it, but it may not have the same type of effect that it's intended to have on cows, right? Human milk, in the very same way, has a spectral effect on human beings, not just babies, but humans in general. And that is actually what's important. So these are very, very valuable proteins that are in milk that will go into your gut biome, have a certain. Well, some of it will fend off bacteria, bad bacteria. Some of it will help immunity. Some of it will just help you digest food better. So they've actually run a lot of these different studies at multiple research institutes and be able to show people. That is what's exciting, is we're going to be able to take this.
Sorry, Max, just one thing. Your audio is not very audible. Is that just for me, or?
No, I'm also hearing that. Maybe it's cutting in and out a little bit. Maybe.
Let me, if you guys can give me a second, let me go ahead and switch on to my other 3G here. I need to complain to my service provider here.
Sounds a bit better. You're definitely better, I think. Max, are you there?
I think he's frozen.
He may have to restart.
Connect. Yeah, interesting stuff about lactoferrin, huh?
Yeah, and actually,
Are we better now?
Oh yes, thank you.
Yeah, much better, thank you.
Perfect, actually.
Yeah, we were just chatting about lactoferrin, and it's interesting that we don't seem to realize that we're giving babies something that might not really fit with our DNA and how our basic composition.
I mean, when you give them cow's milk, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, people don't realize how it's a $45 billion industry, and in the next 5 years, it's going to more than double. I'm talking about infant formula. But at the end of the day, we just didn't have a scalable solution, right? There was no way to feed babies outside of feeding. And I always say that should be the number one thing. Breastfeeding should be, as long as you can do it, others should breastfeed. There's nothing else like it, as we discussed earlier. However, outside of that, in the industry, cow milk is the only thing we had an option. That was the only option. So there wasn't much of a choice. And I think in the future, what you're going to see are other options where people are going to be able to give their babies close to the real thing. And that is what's super amazing for infant and human health. And we're talking about diabetes and a number of other things that human milk actually has been able to help babies develop over time. So it's actually quite valuable if you can actually breastfeed or actually have something that's milk.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that you sort of, I mean, this angle is something that I actually didn't come across in the research that we were doing. So we were thinking, okay, the human milk is for human babies and not really for human adults, right? So I think it's a really interesting point that I'm hearing, and that's great. I'm just wondering, I'm assuming the process is very similar to other cell-based companies, right? So you get some kind of human cell, you put it through some media, and then in a bioreactor. Are you using a kind of a similar process there, or I mean, and I know that some companies, for example, use fetal bovine serum to do that. Are you doing something? Are you using that? Are you using a plant-based medium? Just curious as to see, whether you're following the same thing but doing something else quite differently.
So there are many similarities between us and cell-based meat companies, where we grow the cells and we have the special lactation media or the special growth media you're talking about to be able to grow the cell. But that's where the similarities end and the bioreactor, because the cells are in the cell-based meat. That's your product. You take the cells out, it's a big patty, and you eat it.
Right.
But in our situation, those cells actually stay in the bioreactor and they actually secrete milk. So the secretion is the product. So there is no foreign DNA into the milk. The cells themselves are not the product, which makes it so much easier for regulatory as well as being able to continually make milk. Because those cells don't just make milk one time. We can get the cells to keep making milk to a few hundred different days continuously. So that is able to bring the price point dramatically, and we believe this is a very global solution. Now, you did say something about the growth factor or the FBS side is open.
Yeah.
We did actually just recently launch something called Cruelty-Free Scientific.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell you guys, the hard work that we did early on is paying dividends for us today. I mean, one of the first things that we did was we recognized, hey, listen, the growth factors and the media is going to be the most expensive thing. Let's build a team that just focuses on that. And that's what we did. And now we are able to produce these growth factors at a fraction of the price. And it turns out all the cell-based meat companies need to use very much of the same stuff. So we actually build a business unit, and we're able to help all these different players, and we're working with a lot of cell-based meat companies as well to be able to make this available for everyone.
So are these growth factors then sort of a plant-based medium, or are they using still a cell-based, some animal-based product to do that?
They're not animal-based at all,
Wow.
but they're not technically plant-based. We're going to be making an announcement in about a week or so, because we actually partner with a major company, publicly listed company, and to actually make this happen, and that we've been working with for some time now. So it is a very scalable solution, I can tell you that, and it's a very established industry standard for manufacturing. So
That's very interesting. Kadir?
Sorry, there's a question. How easy is it for the cells to mutate?
When you have established cell lines, then you can actually show that it doesn't mutate or morph into something else. Primary cell lines are a little bit more unstable, but once you've done enough work with these cells and are able to build an established cell line, you normally don't have these type of issues. And by the way, the regulatory folks are quite strict, so we are looking at this QC and QA tools that are being built into our bioreactors to also showcase the health of the cell. That's also very important to make sure that there's no weird things that happen with mutations. Trust me, the regulatory folks are on top of all of this. They want to make sure this stuff is super safe to them.
So interestingly, this whole the bioreactor is essentially the equivalent of a cow's udder or a human breast, right? So I mean, you have these gigantic machines that essentially secrete milk all day long, and so that's the replacement. If somebody wanted to visualize that as sort of the future of milk, right?
Well, I mean, that has to be the future. If we think about sustainability, we think about this planet. We have another billion people coming onto. I mean, we have to have other solutions And also for the people who don't live around, who are not fortunate to live next to a dairy farm or so forth, right? I mean, using this technology, we can drop it into the middle of a desert somewhere, or as long as you have fresh water and electricity and some resources, you can actually produce fresh milk. This is a game changer and quite valuable, I think, for humanity.
So I think the desert thing, Karthika, I think you have a question about the desert, right?
I did indeed have a question about the desert, which I will come back to in a little bit. But I was more interested because Max touched upon Turtle-Free Scientific. So exactly what is it that you do at Turtle-Free Scientific?
So Turtle-Free Scientific was born out of necessity. We needed to tackle the problem to make milk right from the beginning. So we were buying off the shelf EGF, these type of these growth factors for a fortune, and we were waiting for the industry players to come in and to produce this, but that wasn't going to happen. So we started a project where we started producing this using our other methods, other expression systems, and working with other companies externally to be able to tackle it. And we were able to produce very high functioning growth factors that we can use in our own product, our own process, to tackle the cost. Now we turned into a business unit. What we found is a lot of our friends in the cell-based meat industry use very much of the same stuff, and they asked if you guys can do it, we'll buy it from you. We'll buy a lot of it from you. And so we started working on these different collaborations, and now we just built a whole different business unit and building an entire team to run it. And we have several amazing people that are going to be running this. We're going to be making those announcements in coming weeks.
So I know that we've had two scientists on the show before from the medical side and testing side of things. And they were saying that the biggest constraint or problem is that, the bovine, fetal bovine culture, the media is very unstable from one batch to another, that the quality varies, and so from a consistency standpoint and effectiveness standpoint, there are some challenges with that, especially in the medical field. So they were thinking about new drugs, vaccines, and all this stuff, that there is a significant cost in trying to sort of manage all of that, and the variability is a problem in its sort of even in the research of things. So do you foresee this new company that you're spawning off potentially doing sort of medical grade media that can be used even by the pharmaceutical industry?
Lavender, you touched on a very interesting area. So although our focus is so much on cell-based meats, you can imagine that all you have to do is use a different facility, and you can make pharma-grade equivalent as well.
I was thinking that. I mean, I was with you on that all the way through.
And the answer, and the short answer is, we don't publicly talk about this. The answer is yes. We do have a lot of interest from pharma players as well, and we are working with some pharma players. The same stuff. We just need to do GMP grade, and we have a GMP grade facility as well.
Okay.
To do production. So yes, actually it can cross back into therapeutics, cross back into pharma, cross into research institutes. It's very interesting. We've been borrowing the technology from the pharma industry,
yes.
And now we've been able to create this for food industry. And I have a feeling it's now cross back into their industry.
Yes.
Correct.
You took that words right out of my mouth, because I know that initially that's where a lot of this stuff came from the pharmaceutical industry, and now this is going right back, which is amazing. I think that's how things should work in science, right? You borrow from one field, you improve it, and you sort of give it back to another. So that's great. And
it's a huge win-win, because
yes.
There's a lot of therapies out there that cost millions of dollars, because a lot of these things are too expensive. You have to grow these, for example, T-cell therapies and CAR T-cell therapies and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Other stuff is very expensive. So actually, this might, overall, help human health in many different ways that we don't even know yet on the therapeutic side.
So I also want to follow up on a question that I think one of the audience asked, and we also had. So what is the sort of the delta between you and Perfect Day and BioMilk and other companies, right? So what is the the competitive distinction or the USP distinction between you and them? Because we've had some of them on our show as well.
Sure. Listen, Perfect Day. These guys they're friends of ours. They're doing some amazing work.
Right.
We love them. We have different technology and different focus areas, right? So they're focused on whey, casein, a lot of these very important things from bovine to make ice cream and a lot of different products. And they're also by Temasek, which are really close friends of ours here in Singapore. So they're doing using yeast to be able to produce this which for us we're using cells, and of course our focus is really the entire composition. All the rest of these things that are very difficult, even for yeast to produce. So that is what we are looking at doing, is that next generation, I guess, capability. The folks at BioMilk in North Carolina, also friends of ours. They're really wonderful people. And they're focused a little bit more on a customized approach, a B2C approach, where they're trying to get a biopsy from moms and trying to produce something that's very customized. So they're doing something a little bit different, I guess, in that way. But we would be a little bit more closer to them as a technology than Perfect Day.
Great. No, I just wanted to paint the landscape for people, right? Because there's plenty of market space for everybody, and everybody's going to be equally successful. But just from the standpoint of our listeners and viewers, I just wanted to make sure that they understood that this is absolutely the cutting edge of sort of human food, right? And there's sort of subtle nuances, but they are nuances, and that's partly and largely based on sort of the market that you're sort of chasing, right? So, Karthika?
Yeah, we've had a question come in from Cognition Lab. Do you genetically modify the mammary cells to enhance lactation?
The mammary cells themselves do get enhanced. Yeah. There is a lot of, just like a lot of other cell line engineering work that goes on to increase yield. That stuff is very important for us to be able to do. Otherwise, naturally, you need a lot more cell to produce the things that we need out of it.
Yeah. So Max, earlier you touched upon how you were paying, heaps of money to third parties to supply different things for you to be able to, create a functional product, right? Does the formation of Turtle-Tree Scientific kind of help you reduce that, barrier to entry? Can cell-based milk achieve price parity?
Oh, yes. In short, yes. I mean, Turtle-Tree Scientific mission and goal is to be able to enable and make cell-based foods in reality. And I think that what you're going to see this year, that it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You've seen in Singapore, cell-based chicken already being something that's regulatory approved and it's been served. And I'm going to tell you that I think this is going to really scale up this year. We ourselves are going to play a major part in this. We are going to make this stuff available to all of our partners at a price point that they can actually take their products to market. And so that's how valuable Turtle-Tree Scientific is, not just for the whole industry, but for us specifically, it also allows us to take our product to market. So if you think about some of the early price that we're going to have, a lot of these things that our customers want, we're going to be able to do that very, very soon. You may even see trying our products.
It's interesting, Lavi. I don't know whether they realize it, but they're actually designing a new category.
You're absolutely right. Actually, you're absolutely right. We are actually in the process of our company working really hard because we are designing a whole new category, and we are going through that process. It's very difficult, very hard work. But if we get this right, we can dominate and lead this whole new category.
So in our day jobs, we actually are category designers. So that's why we clued in.
So maybe we can have a discussion afterwards as well. I would love to learn more from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned the word you can make milk in a desert, right? So now you have somebody funding you from
From a dessert. Yes.
that's in the middle of the desert. Is that a coincidence, or is that sort of tactical on their part?
Well, it's also out of need. I mean, if you think about it, the UAE and Saudi, these are food scarce regions, right?
Right.
They have a growing population. They're also very concerned about sustainability. So Prince Khalid is very, very focused on solutions, and he's invested in many of the companies as well that are looking for cell-based as well as plant-based that have solutions that feed the planet, feed his people in that region as well. So we're very fortunate that we have investors from there, and we may even we're even looking at a manufacturing facility in the UAE at the moment. So it makes a lot of sense for us to be able to address food security regions first. If that's where the most interest is going to be, and where we can actually have the biggest.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, Max, it's really interesting for me to hear you talk because you're so knowledgeable about this stuff. And to Lavi's point, it's so unbelievable that you used to be a AWS cloud practitioner. You seem like a biotech native. How did that happen?
You know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge believer in being able to reinvent yourself in this life that we live in, and I encourage a lot of folks as well. Is if you're in a career and you want to be able to make a change, want to do something different, you're not too old, and you can do this. For me, it was about early on. It was about taking courses. I took a course at MIT, Biotech for Business. I was learning a lot. My scientists are amazing teachers as well, so I've been learning tremendously from these guys. And of course, being in this industry 24/7. I've been able to capture quite a bit. That being said, this is a lifelong thing, and I'm continuing to learn.
I think it's maybe gratifying. I think if you're a cloud practitioner or you're in some other complete field and this interests you, I mean, I think you are a great example of an entrepreneur who sort of said, my background and my past experience aside, I'm going to tackle a whole new set of problems that could save the planet and save the species that live in it. I think that's a really good calling, right? So we are also right behind that. We want to sort of promote that. So in keeping with that, Pandemic Punditry started this thing called Mindful Mondays. So we're trying to get people in this part of the world to focus on, being mindful of their food, clothing, and all kinds of choices that they make at least one day a week. So the planet gets a bit of a breather. So
you're absolutely right. And I also want to say that even as you're transitioning into other industries, there's always a lot of base knowledge, life knowledge, business knowledge you bring with you.
Yes.
You'd never have to start from scratch. You can always bring over a vast amount of your knowledge and your experience.
Kali?
Thank you, Max. Let's talk about Singapore for a second, right? So they've obviously become some kind of a haven for cell-based food, right? And they're pioneering from a country perspective this kind of regulation and adoption of cell-based foods. What can other countries do to make this a more inclusive process so that for example, reaching the Paris Agreement goals and all these lofty goals that people talk about suddenly seems easy if all countries would merely just come together and say, here's how we're going to consume our food in the future?
Well, I can tell you, being from California, I thought first of all, I thought the world revolves around us. This has been a big change. But the other thing that I thought that is we in the U.S. were going to be leading this area. We were the first in the world. You guys know in Silicon Valley we have such an amazing innovation that happens around this space. And doing this in Singapore, I was actually shocked how fast Singapore took this out. And really, it's not a surprise because we work with the Singapore Food Agency and all the regulatory folks quite a bit. They are very involved. And they're very focused on food security. So they set this this 30 by 30 thing, which is this initiative. So they want to be able to have 30% of their food grown within the country by 2030. So this is a huge goal. I know that the UAE also has something very similar, but this is what's happening, Karthika. It's not just these Paris agreements, but countries are starting to build their own goals, their own initiatives. And that, I think, goes much further, because then they actually get all of the agency, all of their resources, everything behind these initiatives. And of course, this country having these food security issues, you can imagine why they're leading the way.
I'm sure the pandemic has helped, right, in that sense, because I think these concepts of self-reliance and self-sustaining economies and all these things are sort of brought to focus anew because of the pandemic and the lockdown. So has that impacted you? I mean, has that impacted you positively?
It was quite a panic early days, Lavi. I'm going to tell you, when this the pandemic first hit, just like everywhere else, food was flying off the shelves. There was nothing in the stores. There was some real panic there. And unlike other countries like in the U.S. or so forth, in a few days it's going to show up again. But
right.
Here, there was a real concern because it's an island country, and right. they just never knew what was going to happen. So in reality, they had to go out and with a lot of local players to make sure that they got food into the country. Now, that's a scary situation. I think they don't want this to ever happen again in the future. At least be a lot more prepared for that. Now, for Turtle Tree, our team benefited in a way that the country saw us as a essential business. Like, this is important work that's going on. So we were actually one of the very few companies that were able to keep our lights on. The scientists were able to work with full force, and their entire team continued our work without missing a day, as long as we put in, of course, safety measures and all that kind of protocols. We were actually able to continue to work.
Great. So clearly Singapore sort of figured something out, and I think other countries are slowly catching on to the fact that if you seed it correctly, then things will happen, right, automatically. And I think it's unique geography and it's sort of interdependence on the world for its food and a lot of other things. Makes it a bit much more heightened awareness than maybe other countries who feel like, we can just cruise for a bit. Yeah. So
right.
That explains Singapore. I've asked this from people who've joined us from Israel as well. What makes Israel such a hotbed of innovation? Because they constantly, even on the plant-based side, there's a lot of innovation coming out of there. And so I've heard some, great ideas on how that works from the guests that we've had on the show. So it's interesting to see, both these countries who are batting way above their weight in terms of size, right? So that's great to see. And I know, Karthika and I'm originally from Sri Lanka. Karthika lives there. For a small island ourselves, we always wonder, what lessons can Sri Lanka learn, maybe potentially from the rest of the world, especially from countries like Singapore and Israel. So, Karthika, any more questions from the audience or anyone else?
No, I have a question actually. Max, are you worried at all about now this aggressive pushback that you're starting to get from the dairy industry, the beef industry, who are all like, yeah, it's a bunch of baloney. There's nothing as good as the factory farm cow's milk. That's what you need to be having kind of campaigns that they're running?
Not at all. Okay, guys, I can't even tell you how much support we actually have from that industry. That entire industry is been a huge player. Some of our investors in our previous rounds are actually angels and so forth from some of the biggest dairy companies in the planet, because the reality is many of them are looking for other solutions as well. Many folks may not know this, but in the last 20 years, the number of dairy cattle, has not really grown. But the yield has grown by 30%. So that means that they're taxing these existing cows, or the number so much. So, and there's only so much they can do. And I do believe even the existing dairy folks understand that we have other solutions as well. We have to have other people getting involved to be part of this. They themselves are investing heavily into it. that they recommend.
Very interesting answer.
Awesome. We have one last audience question, I think. Are your cells able to produce milk in quantities equivalent to what is produced on dairy farms?
As I just mentioned with dairy farms itself, I mean, they're pumping a lot of antibiotics, many of these folks, to get more yield out from these guys. So they're also bred in a different way to be able to do that. And the short answer to that is it's not apples to apples. It's a very different situation. However, what I can say is with our bioreactors, we're able to produce this milk up to 95% more resource friendly. We need less land, we need less water, less resources to be able to produce that milk. And over time, we'll be able to scale this up to feed more and more folks.
All right.
Great.
I do have one last question because Max was talking about older people potentially benefiting from the milk, human milk. Does that mean it's almost going to be medicinal? I mean, to promote better gut health and fight diabetes. How does that work, Max?
Well, this is really the category that we're building, right? It's not just about drinking milk for goodness sake. It's going to be a functional food. It is a functional food.
Right.
And food is a medicine. This is something that becoming a big thing. And there's a lot of science showcasing it. And that's going to be what we're going to kind of push this product on in that category. So it won't be just, I think there's going to be a lot of benefits associated with it.
Fantastic.
So interesting, this concept of food as medicine and functional food there, right? So I think we've sort of forgotten that, right? Because we've sort of relied on the pharmaceutical company and the doctor to write us a prescription, when a lot of the ills of the world come from what we eat, and then a lot of the cures also come from what we can eat, right? So instead, I think, yeah.
What's happening is actually a lot of pharma companies, traditional pharma companies, are actually starting to move down into the food space as well. Actually, they're looking at this entire area. We've seen companies like Otsuka out of Japan, who's a pharma company. They have a lot of health products that are very food as medicine. We've seen a lot of other players as well doing the same thing. I think we're going to see this as we move forward. People will be expecting the food itself to be a big part of it.
Great.
Sorry, I have another question.
I should call you Kartika Kalambo Ratnam.
I was just really interested to know what the thought process behind the name was, Turtle Tree.
Good one.
Well, really, turtles and trees both are symbols of longevity, and that's how we see the Earth and the planet. They're both symbols of both sides, right? Animal kingdom, and then the plants and the planet, and that's what we want. That's what we stand for. We want to be able to be a part of this journey where we can help this ecosystem, the animals in this world thrive, and the planet to actually thrive as well. Actually, we need the planet much more than the planet needs us.
Yes. Yeah.
But the problem is all the animals on this planet, we're annihilating most of them. So I think this is a big part of the mission of our company, is our imprint, our fingerprint on this planet. So that's where the name comes from. And if you look at the logo, it actually looks like a fingerprint as well.
Yeah.
It also looks like a turtle shell. So that's where you see all of this stuff come together.
Yeah, it's interesting because activism can take many forms, and your brand sort of speaks as an activist and stands as an activism thing by itself. And that's really, I think, the future.
You're absolutely right. I mean, listen, this day and age, doing business for good is why I wanted to do this in the first place. This is why my co-founder is doing this. This is why we're able to attract brilliant talent. There's a lot of people who don't just want to go out and make money. They want to be a part of something bigger. They want to participate in making this a better world. So I think this is very important this day and age.
100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. And we're really thrilled to have you, Max. We've learned a ton about Turtle Tree Rebs, actually. We sort of always pride ourselves on the fact that we do enough research that we know as much as we can possibly know before we actually talk to somebody. But it always impresses us when we find out more when we talk to people, and that's really why we have these live podcasts, because I think the longer format allows you to actually have a lot more interaction, and a lot more information is shared among parties who are sort of like-minded. So we enjoy doing this, and this is what we do. Thank you so much for taking time off late in the evening to join us from Singapore today, Max. And Karthika, unless we have any other questions, I think we just have one comment
coming from the audience. In terms of business and science, what advice you have for other companies that want to make cell-based milk and participate in this revolution?
It really just depends on where you are in your journey in life. If you're looking at joining an existing company that's doing something like this, or trying to do this from scratch. But what I can say is I encourage you to do your research. I encourage you to find the right partners around you, be in an ecosystem where you have access to laboratories and so forth. I think that's what's really important, is find a good ecosystem to be in.
Great advice. Well, thanks again, Max, and hopefully our paths will cross again. Would love to sort of hear your progress, and if there's anything you want to share on our platform, again, we're happy to have you back on at any time.
Absolutely, looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Karthika and Lavi, thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye.